Hello and welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to be discussing a topic that might seem a little bit scary at first, but it's actually a question that scientists have been asking for a long time: what would happen if the sun died? Now, before we dive into the specifics, it's important to note that the sun isn't actually going to die anytime soon. In fact, it's estimated to have enough fuel to keep burning for another 5 billion years or so. But that doesn't mean we can't explore the possibility of what might happen if the sun did eventually run out of fuel. So, let's start with the basics. What is the sun and why does it produce light and heat? The sun is a star, and like all stars, it produces energy through a process called nuclear fusion. This process involves combining smaller atoms, like hydrogen and helium, to create larger atoms, releasing a tremendous amount of energy in the process. This energy is what we see as light and feel as heat, and it's what allows life to exist on our planet. But, as we mentioned earlier, the sun's fuel is eventually going to run out. When that happens, the sun will no longer be able to produce energy through nuclear fusion, and it will start to cool down. So, what would happen to the Earth if the sun cooled down? Well, first of all, it would get really, really cold. The sun is responsible for providing the Earth with almost all of its heat, so without it, the planet would become a frozen wasteland. The average temperature on Earth would drop to around -40 degrees Celsius, and any water on the surface would freeze solid. But that's not the only thing that would happen. The sun is also responsible for providing the Earth with light, and without it, the planet would be plunged into darkness. This would have a huge impact on plant life, as plants rely on sunlight to photosynthesize and produce energy. Without sunlight, plants would die off, and the entire food chain would be disrupted. But it's not just the Earth that would be affected by the sun's death. The sun's gravity is what keeps all of the planets in their orbits, so if the sun were to die, the planets would no longer be held in place. This could lead to some pretty chaotic situations, as the planets would start to drift off into space. The outer planets, like Jupiter and Saturn, would also be affected by the sun's death, but in a slightly different way. These planets are much farther away from the sun, so they wouldn't experience the same drastic drop in temperature as the inner planets. Instead, they would just be a lot darker, as they wouldn't be receiving as much sunlight. And Venus, the planet closest to the sun, would experience a significant drop in temperature as well. But unlike the Earth, Venus doesn't have an atmosphere that could protect it from the cold. This means that the planet's surface temperature would drop even lower than the Earth's, potentially making it too cold for any life to survive. But even with all of these negative consequences, there is some good news: the sun's death wouldn't happen overnight. It would take millions of years for the sun to cool down to the point where it could no longer support life on Earth. So while the idea of the sun dying might be a little bit scary, it's important to remember that it's not something we have to worry about anytime soon. So, that's it for today's video. We hope you learned something new and that you have a better understanding of what would happen if the sun died. Thanks for watching, and we'll finish it. See you in the next one. But before we go, we want to leave you with one final thought. Even though the sun's death might seem like a scary and potentially disastrous event, it's important to remember that it's also a natural part of the life cycle of a star. And while it's true that the sun's death would have a huge impact on the planets in our solar system, it's also possible that new stars and planets will form in the future, bringing with them the potential for new life and new beginnings. So, while it's important to be aware of the potential consequences of the sun's death, it's also important to remember that it's just one part of the bigger picture of the universe. And who knows, maybe one day we'll even discover a way to extend the life of the sun, or find a new source of energy that could sustain us for even longer. So, as always, stay curious and keep learning, because there's always more to discover about the incredible world we live in. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.